A happy post-Mother's Day and a beginning of a new week here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Now and all throughout the Now family of networks. This is your Monday morning edition of Mic'd Up here on PSL and PSN especially. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I am joined by Mike Vukovcan. We are going to talk about a long-awaited, as it did trickle down throughout the weekend, decision by a Pitt recruit and the aftermath of that and how that impacts the program. Jeff Capel's program at the University of Pittsburgh, of course, is where I'm alluding to. Could have been the top recruit in Pitt program history, maybe, certainly under Jeff Capel, goes to LSU instead. The Penguins win a division, first time in a while, actually, which might be surprising for some. They do it kind of a weird way this year, sluggish early on. They pick it up. Malkin injured most of the year, and yet they win the division. What the expectations are now for them going into the playoffs and those possible matchups. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, they came back down to earth a little bit. They win a game on Sunday, but back down to earth, in flux to say the least. Great starts aren't enough. The offense picking up a little bit recently, but the offense sluggish for a while. And this team no longer as dominant as they surprisingly were for a couple weeks ago. So, Mike, before we get fully underway, did you have a nice holiday weekend, nice Mother's Day with your wife and your family?
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. Like, I put this on Facebook. Is that my wife and our three kids went up to Bradford to go see her.
That's right. I did see
mother.
that. Yeah. So you were kind of a bachelor for the
And
weekend.
I was by myself.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, Saturday and Sunday, I had no idea what to do. Like, I want free time, and then I'm sitting here with a dog, thinking I had nothing to do, and I was bored as heck. And I was.
You missed her. You missed her.
I did miss her, and
Okay.
I was glad when they arrived back today. But it was good. She got to spend some time with her family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
my fiance and she's not a mother yet, but I gave her a card and as a cat mother. Maybe that'll come in the future.
Yeah.
And then our mothers came over for dinner, so that
Nice.
was nice, and they're getting along and they're friends now. So yeah, it was a nice Mother's Day. The cats didn't act up. The animals didn't act up for the day, but then right after Mother's Day closes, I see a catastrophe upstairs. So the sheet that they were gonna not have her endure for the day, as the card said, that's kind of over now. But yeah, hopefully everybody had a great Mother's Day weekend. Certainly a special day for all the mothers out there, and certainly all the mothers that we've lost as well, that they get celebrated as well. And Mike, not only was Mother's Day the focus of this weekend, as I'm going to try to somehow casually transition now into the show, but not only was Mother's Day the focus of the weekend for many, but especially as you're home now with your wife and kids around the grandma and celebrating Mother's Day as they should with her mother. I'm sure you're in your head, you're waiting, you're thinking, I have nothing to do. I could cover this. I'm ready to go. Got the articles ready, make an announcement, and I'm good to go. And that was continuously delayed. We do get Efton Reid making the final decision of going to LSU. And I guess thoughts on that decision, thoughts on what that could mean now for the Pitt program and what it could have meant for the Pitt program if they would have landed him, and just how all that went down, because that was initially announced as noon on Friday before the weekend, and we don't see the announcement until, was it Sunday at some point?
Yeah, Sunday.
Kind of under the radar too. It didn't get the media attention that they maybe would have wanted, because they kept not announcing it when it was expected.
Yeah. No, I want to be careful when I say some. I got to watch.
Right.
Stuff I want to say, but I got to be. First of all, I think the way this whole thing was handled by Efton Reid and his family was kind of poor, in that he was supposed to,
admittedly, we delayed our show for everyone else.
Yeah. First of all, he was supposed to make his announcement 3 weeks ago. He said, a time and everything, according to his mother. He's not very big in the social media, and his mother does a lot of his talking for him.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, she was, and then all of a sudden they stopped it, and didn't announce. Say he's not going to announce today. So 3 weeks later, day before yesterday, I'm going to announce, and it was supposed to be on Friday. Once again, deadline happens, doesn't happen. It does no commitment, so nobody has any idea when it's going to happen. And then late Sunday night, it comes out that he goes to LSU. I'm going to tell my son here for the last second. Will,
You're,
stay over
you're
there.
good.
This was no doubt about it. There's no way to sugarcoat this. This was a big blow to Jeff Capel's recruitment. They thought they were getting this kid. He's the type of kid that since Capel's been here for 3 years, they've been trying to land. He's a marquee player, 5-star kid. Pitt doesn't get very many of those at the position that Pitt really needed, center. He would have been able to step in here from day one, make an impact for a year or two, and then take his services to the NBA. It didn't happen, and I wouldn't have been around Jeff Capel last night as far as what he was thinking. I'll have some more on that later today. There's a very big reason as to why Capel's probably really pissed off about this whole situation, and he's legitimately has a right to be. But that's the world of recruiting, and as you know, maybe more so in basketball than in football.
Yeah.
It's a tough business. It's a dirty business, and it's almost as slimy probably as politics.
Especially now. And we've touched on that on past shows. You've touched on it on Pittsburgh Sports Now, and we've touched on it throughout the sites that cover any college team, that you're seeing so many players transfer in and out and make these decisions to leave these programs, even if they're having success, for really the drop of a hat, more this year than any other. With COVID changing, players were able to stay around longer and kind of have a mulligan of a season, which makes sense because of a pandemic. And coaches for years and years had left programs kind of high and dry. A kid would go to a school for a coach, and all of a sudden the coach would leave, and the kid may longer not want to be there. But if they would try to move, they'd have to sit out for a year, whereas the coach is getting paid by 2 schools and somehow sitting pretty. So it's now flipped to where the kids have a lot more power than they did even 2 or 3 years ago. But it has kind of caused a wild, wild west for sure. And this Efton Reid did not end up going to Pitt. And I think it also is going to cause some fans to maybe wonder the future of the Pitt program, just because of losing players, Xavier Johnson, etc., Tony, leaving after this past season. It's another year that did not lead into the NCAA tournament that maybe they thought would have got them there despite the emergence of Justin Champagnie. Pitt fans loving Jeff Capel years ago, but now wanting a bit more from the program and seeing the cupboard bare and needing to restock it. But that's what a lot of programs are dealing with as well. So when you think you have a kid that can make an immediate impact, which is so rare in college sports, you want to get him so much, and it doesn't happen here. Mike, and I also got to mention, of course, Mike Dupp is presented by Martin Lawn Services there. The number behind Mike V at 412-849-5894. But Mike, what does this mean? Because in the reality is, whether you're upset or not, for Jeff Capel, he's going to LSU. He's not going to Pitt. That's the reality. You have to move on and brush your shoulders off. So what does this mean now for Pitt moving forward?
Well, he's going to have to, they need to find a couple big guys, and how they're going to do that, I don't know. They'll get somebody. They're not going to be as talented as Reid, but maybe they'll have a brighter future in that maybe they'll be 3 to 4 year players. Who knows how long Reid will be here? That always doesn't work out. One thing I want to point out is, and I think Pitt fans have a right to be concerned about this, is that we touch upon the 4 and 5 star kids and can they land them?
Right.
What I would be worried about if I was a Pitt fan is that if Jeff Capel is not capable of landing 4 or 5 star recruits,
and a great recruiter is Jeff Capel, his resume says it.
With his reputation, I don't know who would be able to do that for Pitt. Right. They might have to change their expectation. They might have to change, and not in a negative way, because it's not always bad, because every program that's successful out there isn't filled with 4 and 5 star kids. Maybe you have a team that sticks around for 3 or 4 years and you develop your players, because Jeff Capel can develop players too. However, since he's been here, he's targeted the marquee players and he hasn't been successful. And I have to start wondering, and this is not a knock on him, I want to be very clear about this, with the environment in college basketball today and what's going on with the Will Wades of the world and some of the other programs, the Sean Millers of the world who got bounced for
Right.
scandal. There's a lot of that going on, and
Yeah,
the
it's been
NCAA
going on. Yep.
hasn't addressed that totally yet. And until they do, and until coaches fear for their jobs, a lot of that's going to be happening. And you just have to wonder, is it realistic, and is Pitt wasting their time trying to go after guys that, unless you're willing to cheat, I don't know I don't know how great the odds are that you're going to get them.
Yeah.
They're not willing to
Yeah.
play that game, which I commend Capel for. But if you're not willing to play that game, I just wonder whether or not it's better off going after a different type of kid and knowing he's going to be there for the long run.
I totally get what you're saying and totally agree, because we have seen countless examples of random 5-star superstar recruit go. Now, we obviously know a lot of them go to Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, the Thoroughbreds, but randomly you see one of them going to a Memphis, Derrick Rose, for example, under John Calipari, or you see random 5-stars going to those schools, and you think, well, how did that program get that kid? We don't know at the time, and then 10 years later, you find out, okay, some shady business went on to have them land that kid. So if you're going to be a program like a Pitt, who great program, but certainly not that blue blood, and you're not willing to give them the bag, give the family the bag, pay some car bills, go basically a shady route and do myriad of different things that we all know about, then you're going to have a tougher time to get that kid. And we've also seen some programs all the way from really elite to even not so have success and have consistent success building up a program and then deep tournament runs, and I'm talking NCAA tournament runs, by having kids that are there for 2, 3, or 4 years against programs that have the one and dones. There's been an entire conversation this year. I think this year is the biggest conversation to have it. And this is where maybe the come to Jesus meeting should occur for Capel and programs like Pitt, because we saw an NCAA tournament, Mike, with Duke not relevant, Kentucky not relevant this past year. These programs that have been one and done, they have been building up one and done. Coach K didn't want to do it initially when Cal was doing it, but then eventually came up with the Joneses, built a one and done team with Zion. But we've now seen that doesn't work as well, because if teams have 3 or 4 year players like Syracuse does every year, they always churn veteran players with Boeheim, it can get you deep tournament runs. Even if you're a 10 or 11 seed, it can make you ready for a long tournament run, and you can play above your seed, etc. Huggins with West Virginia, he never gets a 5-star since really Kenyon Martin, but he just churns 3-star recruits, builds them up, gets some in the NBA, got Javon Carter in the NBA, and then gets his team to be a contender. That might be the better way to go. It might be the realistic way to go, that it might take some coaching, but get more of those kids, get quantity over quality maybe, and get 3 or 4-star recruits instead of 1 5-star and a bunch of 2s, because that 5-star might not even come. Then you put all your energy into recruiting that kid, you don't get him, and then you're kind of screwed. That may be that's a great point, and there's been a lot of programs that have been able to be successful looking for players that are there a long time rather than just a one and done. The one and done it worked for a while, but it seems like now it's not the only recipe, and maybe not even the best recipe.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is something that Jeff Capel was a proud guy. He's used to recruiting, so this could be.
Yeah.
And knowing him, he might not put any stock into that type of theory. He says, "This is the way I do it, and I'll get the kids that I can get." And it didn't work with Efton Reid and some other guys, but we'll see. It's a tough day because he put a lot of time and energy into recruiting him and his family, and they thought they had him, and
yeah, it's tough.
It didn't work out. So it's on to the next kid. That's the way the recruiting has to be. And
yeah,
the only problem is there's still 3 to 4 players, probably 3 players short on their roster, and we're already into May here. So
yeah.
And
that would have been a big fix. That would have been a big hole that was fixed if they would have got that one kid. It would allow you to breathe that sigh of relief a little bit.
Yeah, and then you start to look. Okay, I get Reed, Champagne comes back, and then you start to imagine, and now all of a sudden, boom, that doesn't happen, and now he's gonna. But I'm sure we haven't heard the last of this situation. And like I said, later today, I'll have some more as far as this situation, which I'm sure will
Keep being
rile
discussed.
Pitt fans up a little bit, but
Yeah.
we'll see. But the other big sport, Mike, is
Yeah.
the Penguins. Big weekend for the Penguins. Congratulations to Mike Sullivan. He continues to show that
Mhm.
he's one of the better coaches, top half coaches in the NHL. Everything they had to deal with, the injuries,
Yeah.
your GM quitting, COVID, everything else.
Yeah.
And they won their first division title since 2014, I believe.
That's correct. Yep.
Going into the playoffs, if you follow them very intensely, what would you say if the Penguins don't have success in the playoffs? What would you attribute as to why they won't have success?
I would say easily if they don't have success in the playoffs, and this was a concern earlier in the year, this has been a concern even throughout the season, even while they were winning. People could immediately point to Malkin in the power play, and if you put him back there, will that have as much success because it wasn't as successful when before he got hurt? You could say that. I think goaltending would be the issue. And this maybe you could say every single year. It might be the easiest thing to say, but it has been a concern this year. Of course, Matt Murray, that he's gone. We see what Fleur is doing in Vegas. It is the Tristan Jarry show. They've had Casey DeSmith come in there at times. Jarry has been offered the keys to this Cadillac and has not really been able to grab the bull by the horns. It's been a waffling situation most of the year. I'd imagine Jarry has to be the guy. He now has more experience. He has to be the guy. We've seen flashes still of that where he could be the guy. But I would imagine that whether it's Jarry being the guy, whether he stays in there, whether DeSmith ends up taking the reins, he comes in there. If they don't advance, if they would have one of those years where they lose in the first round, which could still be a tough series to Boston, to the Islanders, whoever the case may be. It's not going to be given to them, even with them winning a division. There are teams that could be a bad matchup, so to speak, for the Penguins. I think that's what the casual hockey fan has to realize in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The reason why you see so many great teams lose early throughout history, even historically great teams. Look at the Lightning a couple years ago. They would then win a cup, but they lose the first round before winning that cup. Matchups can be a problem. If you have a goaltending who is either not good enough or not playing well enough, an opposing team has a goaltender that can steal a series, for example, stand on his head for the hockey phrase, or it's just a bad matchup that it could elicit that. That's where the upsets could occur. So I think if the Penguins don't get the goaltending, no matter who's in net, that's going to be the reason why they would lose early, why they wouldn't have a deep run. I will say, though, and you alluded to this, and obviously they're going to be judged by the playoffs. When you have Sidney Crosby, the best player in the league, or one of the best players in the league his whole career, and a generational top 5, top 10 all-time player, you're going to be judged by championships. And he's won 3, he's been to 4 finals. Wow, a Penguin. But what they've had to endure this year, and other teams had to endure it too, but Malkin missing most of the year, the waffling of goaltending, they were not good at the beginning of the year. Some people wrote them off thinking they had to start rebuilding already. Question marks on Letang, question marks all around this team. And to win a division, a tough division with the Capitals, et cetera, all being good and switching some players around, but still being better than the Penguins earlier on in the year, that's a testament to Mike Sullivan for sure. I think he definitely should be right up there for the Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year. He's won 2 cups, but was held back in the past of having Crosby, having Malkin. People would say, the voters would say, they admitted this. When you have Jordan and Pippen, it's going to be rough to be Coach of the Year. Phil Jackson, 11 rings, but not that many Coach of the Year awards. I get it, but Malkin not there that much this year. When he was in there, he wasn't that great. And it really required coaching him up for everything they had to deal with this year. So I think he definitely has the greatest chance of his career to get that award, which he would deserve. And people got to stop calling for his job every 2 weeks when he has a bad few games, which occurred earlier in the year, as insane as that sounds. But I think it'd be goaltending that would hold them back. I think the Bruins could be that question mark matchup. But winning a division based on this scenario is still really, really rough. It's pretty wide open, though, I would think, in the conference.
Yeah, I think the bar got raised with the winning the division and the way they finished down the stretch. And
yeah.
Unfortunately for the Penguins, it's good, but it's also bad because they're going to find out the way the Steelers find out is that those two franchises, fairly or unfairly, are judged differently than anyone else because, it's nice now. Penguin fans are pumped right now, but once they lose their first game in the playoffs, the people aren't going to remember that this is a team just like the Steelers. They're judged by what you do in the playoffs.
Right.
And is that fair? Probably not. But that's the franchise they've developed. And if the Penguins don't make it with them winning their division and showing to be one of the best teams in the East, you don't make a deep run into the playoffs. I'm sorry, it's a failure.
I agree, and especially because
yeah.
of how Ron Hextall and Brian Burke had to handle this team once they took over. I think they thought it was a rebuild. I honestly think this. I think they thought they were taking over a team after Jim Rutherford leaves, and they thought it was a rebuild. And Jim Rutherford, we talked about this before. Jim Rutherford was always in that win now mode, which some would criticize it because he would trade draft picks away to win now, and it won him 2 cups and got him into the Hall of Fame, actually. But he leaves, surprisingly. They weren't ready for it. They bring in 2 guys that are big on rebuild. They thought they'd be rebuilding, and then they keep on winning despite the injuries. And they bring in a guy like Jeff Carter, who's always been in the playoffs, who has been playing ridiculously well. I thought he'd be good, but I didn't think he'd be like this, or he's looking for
that's what I think's changed.
Bars raised.
That's what I think's changed everything, Mike, is that in the past we've seen the Achilles heel for the Penguin in the playoffs the last couple of years has been teams shutting down Malkin and Crosby, and there's been no secondary scoring.
Right, you got to have it.
If you go by their scoring, they couldn't score a goal. Now you see with Carter, it's easy to say that now based off the last 3 or 4 games.
Right.
But that third line looks to be as dangerous as with him and Zucker. That looks to be as dangerous as the first line. And when you have 3 lines rolling like that in the playoffs, and you get something from the fourth, that's so that's why the stakes now are raised on the Penguins. Now they don't have, aside from maybe as you point out, goaltending, they don't got a lot of weaknesses. And this is a team that should win, or I shouldn't say should win the cup, but they should make a deep run. And if they don't, unfortunately, there'll be criticism, and that criticism will be just.
Especially because if you look around the league, and as I said, it's wide open, but it's wide open not because there are tons of elite teams. It's wide open because a lot of teams have weaknesses. You could argue the Penguins have the least amount of weaknesses for a team to make a deep run. I think the problem will be the one weakness the Penguins could have and the one question mark they could have is goaltending. And if you have to give me a weakness for your team going into a postseason in the Stanley Cup playoffs and say, you're going to have one weakness, here's a weakness, but everything else will be fine. That's the one weakness you would least like to have. So that is unfortunately their current weakness. The Capitals have that weakness as well. There's question marks if they have enough depth. There's a lot of top-heavy teams out there. So we will certainly see, but you spring up a great point, and that's very, very true. You got to have depth and secondary scoring to win a cup. You look at cup clinching goals, players that step up. Even Kessel in the first cup, yes, he wasn't great defensively. Yes, he wasn't great full strength, but he was a borderline Conn Smythe winner the 2016 year. That's a third member. That's a top 3. He was a third behind Malkin and Crosby. Even Maxine Talbot going years back. Darren McCarty scoring a game-winning cup-clinching goal on those Red Wing teams in the 90s. Having depth is the deal. And Jeff Carter may wane because he is older, and I never would have expected this for a week so of him. But Gensel has the experience. Zucker stepping up is even bigger than Carter because if Carter would falter because he's old, Zucker might be able to step up and still get it done there. And many had said that if Jeff Carter is not an integral part of at least the third line, the trade is meaningless. That's been the case. So you don't have to worry about moving them down to the fourth like Marlowe and some others of years past, those veterans you bring in. So they got to have depth. They have had depth in scoring. They're scoring 8, 7, 6 goals a game here recently. I don't know if that's going to pick up, but even if it's close to picking up, that'll work. I will say what needs to happen also is, well, you got to have secondary scoring here. You got to have goaltending be good enough. That would be a question mark. The matchup could be also a thing. But Crosby and Malkin, as good as they've been, and they're Hall of Famers, certainly Crosby has stepped up at times. In recent postseasons when they have not had a deep run, they did take a while to get going. If you look at last year, even the year before, Crosby and Malkin both took a few games to get under themselves in the playoffs, and they weren't that great. Now, I'm not saying they have to carry the team. You got to have depth, of course, make that clear. But they are the best players. They do need to play like the best players. And if they don't get on that stat sheet for 2-3 games and they would lose those games. While you need depth in scoring, while you need better goaltending, they're going to have to get some blame as well because they are the guys steering the ship and they get the credit when they win. But goaltending is the question mark. So if you get it, you're fine. But you look at the last game, Penguins score 8, but they also give up 4 goals. So does that make you comfortable? It makes you think you got to require tons of scoring, which you can't feel like 6-7 goals is going to happen every night in the postseason. But I'm excited. Hockey playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, most exciting time of the year. Honestly, even casual fans can really enjoy it. The puck's always moving. Games can go on end. I know that could be annoying for some, but I think it's really entertaining. And this year more than even last year, because last year we were just trying to get through it. This year, and just a quick note here, I want to say this isn't a Penguin. This is a Penguin show, of course. It's a Pittsburgh sports talk show. But as much as Crosby's done wonders for this team this year and stepped up and carried them while Malkin's been hurt, I know some media members have called for this. I couldn't go this far. I couldn't vote Crosby the Hart over McDavid. You're looking at 100 points in, I think it's 55, 56 games for McDavid. That is insane. The Oilers don't have as much depth even as the Penguins. Yes, the Penguins lose Malkin, but there's not a Robin to McDavid's Batman there. They don't win a division, but the team around him is not nearly as good. So Crosby, a great job, Hall of Famer, top 5 ever. Carrying him without Malkin's phenomenal. But Connor McDavid's the Hart Trophy winner. He got to be MVP. 100 points in 56 games is just ludicrous. So I don't think there's a way you can justify not giving it to him this year for the regular season.
Yeah, I don't. I'd have to. I'm not prepared to talk about that because I want to look through some stats first. And I know the argument has been that the Penguins had the division.
I can give you that. I think the division was tougher, sure.
As far as the quality teams, and Malkin wasn't there for such a long time.
Right.
And he was the one steadying force. So I understand that. And the other thing is you also got to look at possibly Matthews up in Toronto.
Yeah, Austin Matthews for sure.
So, yeah,
and they did win the division. They won the division.
I think the hard part about that award is, and it's like in every other award, is what is the real meaning behind it? Is it the most valuable to the team? Is it the most skilled player? Is it the player? Does it automatically go to the guy with the highest amount of points?
Yeah. Is it the best player on the better team?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard
to I get it.
quantify.
I think it's different mentality. I mean, I do think of it as an individual award. So your team winning a division doesn't have to give it to you. I kind of think of it for me and how I vote MVPs, and I have an NFL vote now in the Pro Football Writers, but is almost if you take McDavid off the Oilers, if you take Crosby off the Penguins, which team is worse? I think the Oilers would still be worse because there's not as much there before the year, even with Malkin off the Penguins. But that's definitely a conversation and debate that's going to rev up the engines there. I will say I think McDavid's going to win it because I don't think nationally they're going to not give it to a guy with that many points in that few of games. But just to answer that conversation going on from some colleagues, I wouldn't be mad at Crosby getting it. Certainly has deserved it for some other years, but he's also won it some years where they didn't win a division since it's been a while since they did. So
I will say this though, if you go through the one or the two awards, the Jack Adams or the Hart, Mike Sullivan deserves.
He deserves it.
He deserves the Jack Adams more than Sidney Crosby deserves the Hart.
And Crosby's won the Hart before, but Sullivan winning that Jack Adams would certainly be deserved this year more than really any other, for sure. I definitely think Brendan Moore has been brought up, but I think Sullivan would get my vote there. Mike, I guess as we wrap things up here on this Monday morning show, a lot to talk about, a lot going on. Check out the sites for tons more coverage, and we'll be with you the rest of the week here. Again, mic'd up here on PSL. Subscribe to the channel and also hit up Martin Lawn Services there with the sign behind Mike V. The Pirates have come back down to earth a little bit. Question marks in the outfield. They do win on Sunday 6-5 over the Cubs, but again, we're kind of learning the Cubs aren't that great. Many thought they would be more than what they've been. I didn't think so. They're kind of also coming back down to earth a little bit there, as that's a franchise in flux. The Pirates, for a while, were playing above themselves. They're above 500. They had multiple players vying for an all-star berth, but you're even seeing when Tyler Anderson and Brubaker pitched that not being good enough because the offense didn't do enough. They do score on Sunday, but this team has come back down to earth, to say the very, very least.
Yeah, and I think where they are, I think they're a little bit above, better.
Maybe still.
They're on pace right now, entering tonight's game with Cincinnati. They're on pace for 69 wins. I think that's where most people thought. The reason they've been struggling lately, this road trip they had, most teams in baseball, the Pirates starters ERA during this just concluded road trip was 2.69. If you get, most teams in baseball, if your starters have that sort of ERA, you're going to win a lot of games. Unfortunately for the Pirates, they couldn't get any hitting. They're enduring some injuries now with Moran. Reynolds has been out for a couple games, and that's not a who's who of outfield when you're throwing out there Kyan Tom, Troy Stokes, Wilmer Defoe. Those aren't guys that you expect to win a lot of games with, but they did yesterday. Right. And I'm to the point now. Just going to say this real quick, and we could maybe touch upon this more tomorrow after the Reds game. But I'm done with Gregory Polanco. I don't care what he does. I'd rather learn more about those three guys that I mentioned, and they picked up a guy off of waivers yesterday, Ben Gamel. I'd rather learn more about those guys and do they have some sort of role, whether it's a bench or whatever, than Gregory Polanco. He had to be out because he violated, according to Jason Mackey, COVID protocol, let his team down. His act is done. He's not a bad guy, but he's not going to be here next year. So I don't care that he plays. He's done. They should do whatever they want to do with him, but I wouldn't have him on the team anymore.
It doesn't serve the benefit, really. The only benefit of Polanco being on the team and the thinking process before the year was if he could play well enough because of his age to get some value in a trade mid-season. He's not played well enough to do that. Yes, he did pick it up a little bit recently. He's making contact at least, not striking out every at-bat. He had a couple dingers. But injuries, and that's not his fault. He's hustling. But then breaking COVID protocol and just kind of acting a fool a little bit. Yeah, I think it's about time you're done with him, especially when you have other options of guys that you want to see. This year, forget the 2 weeks where they were above 500. Going into this year, everyone agreed that it was about individual performances, grading this team individually, seeing who's going to be here for the future, seeing what they had more than wins and losses. Because even if you didn't think they're going to lose 100, nobody thought they're going to win the pennant this year. And that's still what it's about now that they came back down to earth. So there are guys to look at. There are guys to see where they fit in. Colin Moran has been a consistent hitter, now dealing with an injury, but Phil Evans cooled off. Does he deserve a spot in the order? It's a question mark. And Hayes is still a question mark because he has certainly been out much longer than anybody thought. Yeah. Much longer than anybody thought. And honestly, there's not too much conversation even about him and when he'll return. And that's kind of been hush-hush from who I talked to covering the team, that Shelton's not really able to give much information. It's kind of the unknown. It's kind of just out there. He's not withholding anything, but he just doesn't know. So it's looking at individuals for sure. I'm right there with you. The Reds are certainly a team that they could beat, but again, wins and losses don't really matter. It does suck for guys like JT Brubaker and Tyler Anderson that they're not able to get wins when they pitch well, though. That does, because you're 6 runs against the Cubs. They win 6-5 on Sunday, but then 2 runs, shutout, 2 runs. I mean, not enough offense.
They just don't have enough quality hitters in the lineup right now. And, even the win yesterday was bloops. They just don't have enough power in their lineup, extra base hit, and they're going to have to just piecemeal runs together. And that's just the way it is. And, as far as Polanco, they're going to, if they cut him or play him, they still have to pay him $11 million.
That's why, too,
Yeah, so if you're going to have to pay him regardless, he's done. Get rid of him and play the guys they have until some of the younger guys are ready to come up and play. And that's just the way it has to be.
Yeah, that's going to be the way it has to be when you're rebuilding, and that's what the future is going to hold because Polanco's not going to be a part of the future no matter how he played this year. So again, why? I don't see a point either. I did enjoy your tweet there about Tyler Anderson. I do think that's one blessing in disguise that has happened this year. He has been put in some tough spots, but he has really stepped up. And out of all the pitchers, I don't think many thought Tyler Anderson would be one of the better ones this year. He has really stabilized himself as a legit pitcher that's part of the future. So that's been good. It's happened for a few players. That's Stallings. Reynolds has turned back the clock, showed he can still be one of those cornerstones. There's been some good pieces here, and they play better than advertised, but not good enough to be worrying about Polanco or to really care too much about wins and losses that you're hurting the progress of other players. Well, that'll do it for this morning's edition of the show. This is one of those where I say it every show, but you really got to keep tabs on these sites, certainly Pittsburgh Sports Now in particular, as Mike alluded to some coverage the rest of the day about the Efton Reid scenario, about him going to LSU and the aftermath and backlash there, and how that's one that got away from Jeff Capel, how maybe a player he thought he was going to nab, and the future of the Pitt basketball program that's now in flux, because I know that that's a question on the minds of many of you as you go about your workday there and talk at the metaphoric or literal water cooler, whether you're working from home or in an office. Either way, that's, I'm sure, something on the top of your mind. So head over to PSN to get that coverage. For Mike Vukovcan, I'm Mike Asti. For all of us here at the network, that'll be it for this Monday morning show. Mic'd Up is presented by Martin Lawn Services at 412-849-5894.